So amid all the exotic sights and sounds and smells that one finds in a circus, there is one moment which for me holds more daring, beauty, and grace than any other. It's that moment when cross-path spotlights illumine upturned faces in scattered circles around the arena as they focus high, high above the ground. And the moment is this: the aerialist lets go of the trapeze and sails and turns, sometimes even tumbles in midair. That's the moment. In seconds, the flyer will be in the hands of the catcher, who has timed the swing of his trapeze in such a balance against the motion of the flyer, which is a pattern not easily discernible to the audience, that he is going to be in just the right place at just exactly the right time to grasp the flyer's arms. So knowing that that is my favorite moment of the circus, you will understand that when I got these videos of my grandchildren learning to fly on a trapeze in circus school, I was really excited. So I thought I would share it with you. This is Kira and Amy's first completed catch. Maybe. Where's our picture? We need our picture. We got it. The music's great, but not without the picture. Can you imagine being the mother filming that? But there comes that moment in so many times in our own lives when we let go of whatever it is that we're clinging onto so tightly, trusting that God will catch us and then swing us to that next grace-filled moment of our lives, when all the preparation of our lives up until that time comes into play. And I have to tell you, they tried that a lot of times before they actually did it, just like we do in life. And so, yes, we let go, maybe with our hearts in our throats, but we finally let go of what we're clinging on to. Now, last week we were introduced to Nicodemus, who came to Jesus by night and lasts all of 9 verses in his conversation with Jesus before he fades into the night from whence he came. This week narrates another character's encounter with Jesus, the Samaritan woman at the well. Now, the contrast between Nicodemus and the Samaritan woman is quite striking. And given the fact that they appear one right after the other in John's gospel, we're meant to notice this contrast in detail. So we have Nicodemus. He's a Pharisee, an insider, a leader of the Jews. He's a man. He has a name, but he comes to Jesus by night. The character whom we are introduced to in this week's text is a Samaritan, a religious and political outsider. She's a woman. She has no name, but she meets Jesus at noon in full daylight. And the contrast between their conversations is even more extraordinary. We discover Nicodemus, he is unable to let go, to move on beyond the confines of his religious system, whereas the Samaritan woman moves outside of her religious expectations, engages Jesus in a theological debate. Whereas Nicodemus cannot hear Jesus is sent by God, The woman at the well hears the actual name of God, I am, in her conversation with Jesus. Well, Nicodemus's last questioning words to Jesus expose his disbelief. How can this be? The last words of the woman at the well also posed as a question. He cannot be the Christ, can he? Lead her to witness to the whole town. Her thirst for the truth, for the living water Jesus offers, changes not only her life, but the life of her entire community. So both stories we heard today, in the children's story, the story of Moses, the children of Israel, and the story of the Samaritan woman, they both deal with thirst, something that we all know too well, because we are a thirsty people. There's medical research that tells us that the consumption of water is a good thing. Thirsty or not, we all know you're supposed to drink. It's about 64 ounces or 8 glasses of water a day. It's one of those pathways to health. Water is essential to life itself. And it's also a central religious and ceremonial symbol in every religious tradition around the world. Water is one of the most critical needs of existence. It ranks right up there with air. So it's no wonder that things like droughts scare us so much. We see political struggles that occur over the rights to clean drinking water. And even in our own country, there are rights about who owns what water. Those who live in the Great Lakes states are looked upon with envy by those poor people who live in the dry southwestern states. And based on data from NASA, the World Health Organization, and other agencies, severe water shortages are affecting at least 400 million people today, will affect 4 billion people by 2050. Southwestern states, such as Arizona, will face often other severe freshwater shortages by 2025. Did you hear that? That's just 2 years from now. Now, the concern, maybe, that you might be feeling right now because of that information makes it a little bit easier to understand the reaction of the people of Israel in that Hebrew Bible passage. Because without that experiential background, we might just pass off the behavior in that story as more whining about a little bit of discomfort on a very long camping trip. But when we look at it in the right context, it actually becomes a matter of life and death. They were wandering in a desert, after all. I mean, who can pack enough water for all those people for 40 years? So it's no wonder that the lack of potable water would trouble the children of Israel. So we don't know where this place, Rephidim, is. There are some people who have hazarded a guess or two, but we're not exactly sure. But wherever it is, we know that it's a very dry place. And so panic set in. Instead of voicing a question or stating a concern, in Exodus chapter 17, verse 2, it says, they quarreled with Moses and said, "Give us water to drink." Now, what's hidden in that English translation is the level of this complaint. It is a word that's used in Hebrew that means to file a complaint. So what happened in this place in the desert is people immediately called for Moses' impeachment. Now, maybe they were just thirsty. Maybe it was left over from a couple chapters previously where they had the same problem, but it seems a somewhat excessive move. They issue an ultimatum. Give us water, Moses, or get out. So then what happens? Moses yells at them and says that when they challenge his leadership, they are actually challenging God, and how dare they distrust the one who rescued them from slavery. And then the people respond by saying, "You call this a rescue? You brought us out here to die. And our children and animals are dying too." And so then Moses turns and he starts yelling at God and says, "I'm in trouble here. What are you going to do about it?" It's clear to see from this wonderful scene in our Bible that when essential needs are threatened, trust collapses. And the community begins to erode when survival is at stake. The evidence of this scene says that no one acts terribly graciously in the midst of this crisis. The people threaten regime change. The leaders questions their right to complain. No one acts especially godly here except for God. The God of the Hebrew Scriptures expresses a wide range of emotion towards God's people throughout the biblical story that we read in the Old Testament. But in this story, there's an amazing tolerance on the part of God. You see, normally it's people who stand before God, right? It's a sign of obedience and worship. People are called into God's presence. But in this story, to show them where the water is, God says to Moses, "I will stand before you." An amazing act, a humbling act for Moses, I would think, because he, as the appointed representative of God, did not act with that kind of graciousness. So perhaps we might see in both passages today, the Samaritan woman, the children of Israel in the desert, a subtle reminder of our own human need and our response to that. Because we too are thirsty. We forget because we usually have what it takes to quench our thirst. We forget that we really are only a few days away from dying of thirst. What do they say? 9 days without food, 3 days without water, something like that. We forget that God provides and that it's up to us to be stewards of what God provides. And worst of all, because we can drink, we forget that daily there are many who die of thirst. We forget that we are all one family and that all of us are thirsty physically and or spiritually. Because every single one of us has our thirsty days. Even Jesus had them, at least if John's right in the story from the gospel this week. But the difference is, for Jesus, a thirsty day was an opportunity rather than a terror. It was a chance to give out of abundance rather than a panic to fill an emptiness. So whether in the middle of the wilderness or at the well, Jesus meets us in a shared need. He emptied himself so that he knows what it's like to feel emptiness. He succumbed to the ravages, the needs of the flesh, so that he could find us in our needs and our thirsts. And then he says, "I can help you with your thirst as easily as you could have helped me with mine." But friends, we tend to be skeptics. "You don't have a bucket," we say. "You don't have what I need. You've got words and ideas. You've got emotions and philosophies. Thanks, but what I really need is some water. What I really need is what I can hold in my hand or put in my pocket. What I really need is recognition from people like me. What I really need is stuff I can get with my own bucket. So thanks, Jesus, but no thanks." And so we drop our own bucket in the well and we drink. And we drop it again, and we drink again, and we drop and drink, drop and drink, and still we thirst. It isn't enough. It's never enough is it? We thirst, we search, we settle for a while, but it's never enough. Now, you might be asking a question I heard asked some time ago that still echoes in my soul. Jesus says, if we drink the water he offers us, we will never be thirsty. So why are we still thirsty? Have you ever wondered that? Why we still live in emptiness, why we still go through horrible things. Maybe we ask, is it because we don't ask? Why do we not fully embrace the life that Jesus offers? It can't be that simple, can it? Just ask, just want it, and he will give it? What's the catch? Well, friends, we are on this journey, and our lives are full of so many changes. Some of us are still recovering from the last great challenge to our faith, a frightening prognosis for our health, the death of someone who's given our lives deep joy and stability, a severe threat to our relationship with our spouse or our children or our parents or our roommate, some staggering blow to our job or career. Others of us are still in the midst of a crisis, and for some, unknown challenges lie ahead. But this is where we live. We're here because we have recognized that our lives are not our own, that we belong to God, and so we're grateful. We've responded in some way to his call to follow in faith in Christ. And we now seek to live by that grace, by Jesus' love beyond all of our deserving on life's journey. And how do we do this? Well, in our Lenten journey this year, we're talking about how we learn to live better from the inside out, to nurture and nourish our soul so we'll be ready to go out and meet the needs of people in the world. And that is the challenge of a lifetime. We don't get to just drink once and be satisfied. Jesus offers us living water, and we understand it differently as we go through this journey. So yes, in many ways, we feel like we are suspended in midair, getting ready to let go, to swing from our safe perch to some sort of release and catch. No longer hanging on to those things that we have seen and touched, but trusting in the promises that God has made known to us in Jesus Christ. Now, there's no spotlight on this venture. No one's out there to flatter us or to ridicule us. There's only the light of God's love in which we live and move. So if it seems like we are flyers suspended in air and reaching only by faith, then we just need to know that God is the unfailing catcher. And if it sometimes seems that we are flying through life's air without support, by faith we know that invisible to the world and often invisible to us as well, God has actually already caught us in God's arms. So we can let go. And we can fly. Amen.